My name is Elowen Whitaker, and last spring, my family planned a wedding in my home without telling me. They sent the invitations, they booked the vendors, they posed at my front gate for their filtered venue sneak peek. They used my name, my address, my design work, everything but my permission. And they thought I wouldn't say a word. But this time, I didn't cry. I didn't ask why. I built a case. When the wedding guests arrived in pastel chiffon and floral arrogance, they found the gates locked, the police on site, and their legacy unraveling, slide by slide, frame by frame. They called it sabotage. I called it proof. Before I show you how a canceled wedding became the cleanest break of my life, I want to ask, have you ever had to choose between peace and permission? Between being quiet and being seen? If you've ever been erased by the people who claim to love you, drop your city in the comments. Subscribe and stay with me. Because sometimes justice doesn't knock. It builds its own front door and bolts it shut. The Grove was quieter than usual that night, but maybe it just felt that way. Every sound, forks tapping porcelain, whispered conversations from other tables, the clink of ice and crystal, felt hollow, distant, like the world knew something was about to break. The white tablecloth stretched between us like a sterile surgical field. Harold sat at the head, polished as ever in his navy suit and tie, like this was a board meeting, not dinner. Margot's lips wore their usual gloss of Chardonnay and forced serenity. Grayson, across from me, hadn't looked up from his filet mignon since we sat down. I knew they'd ordered ahead. That was their style, no surprises. I had arrived on time, still a little breathless from the cab ride, tucking a loose curl behind my ear and rehearsing my words one last time. This was supposed to be the beginning of something. A reveal, my future. Instead, it became the end of theirs and mine. I'm launching Whitaker and Elm, I said, somewhere between the first and second course. It's a design firm, full-service interiors, sustainability-focused. I've signed the lease for the office. We're set to open by fall. The words were steady, clear, practiced but not robotic. I smiled. Not too much, just enough to mask the tremble I felt underneath. A pause. One breath too long. Margot's knife clinked too sharply against her plate. "How lovely," she said, voice silk thin. Of course, everyone needs hobbies. "It's not a hobby," I said, gently correcting her, like I always had to. "I've been working on this for over a year. Clients are already lined up. It's real." Harold didn't speak. Instead, he reached into his suit jacket, pulled out a flat envelope, and placed it next to his bread plate. I stared at it, knowing instantly it was heavy with strings. "I had Charles draft an offer," he said. "Associate creative director at Middleton and Finch. Corporate-backed, stable, benefits." I didn't touch it. He went on. "You'd be working under Randall Kimball. Good man. I've already told him you'd accept. Training begins next week in Atlanta." The silence was louder than his voice. "Dad," I said carefully, "I just told you I've started my own company." "I heard you," he replied, cutting his steak with deliberate precision. "And I'm offering you a real future, one with structure, security." Margot reached for her wine. "He's only trying to protect you, darling. Running a business is unpredictable." "I don't need protection," I said. "Not like this. I didn't come here asking for permission." Harold looked up finally. "No, you came here to make a statement. Fine. Here's mine." He pushed the envelope across the table. "This is your last chance to do it right. Take the job, and the trust fund remains in place. Say no, and you're on your own. No money, no name, no backing." Grayson looked up just then, startled, but still said nothing. His fork hovered in the air, dripping. I stared at the envelope. Pale gray, textured, embossed with my father's monogram. It looked elegant, benevolent even, like a gift. But I knew better. "It's not about the job," I said slowly. "It's about control. You never wanted me to build something. You wanted me to obey. You want independence? Harold leaned back. Then fund it yourself. You won't have my name propping you up. I reached into my purse and pulled out my house keys. Keys to the Savannah townhouse he'd paid the down payment on years ago. I placed them gently on the linen beside my untouched dessert. I'm not taking your money, I said. Not the job, not the handout, and not the leash. Margot's face contorted, some mix of hurt and confusion like I'd slapped her. But I saw no tears. Grayson blinked. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Of course. Harold's voice sharpened. Then I'm done paying for your life. You never paid for my life, I said quietly. You paid for my silence. And with that, I stood. The linen napkin fluttered as I laid it across the table. The room around us continued as if nothing had happened. Servers gliding between tables, a couple laughing softly behind us, someone popping a bottle of champagne 2 tables over. I walked out, heels clicking against the floor, spine straight, heart thrumming. Outside, the Savannah night wrapped around me, warm and wet, full of magnolia and mist. I kept walking, past the valet, past the corner where I would have called a car. I didn't cry. I didn't even glance back. I started drawing the blueprint for my own escape. Finally, not theirs. I didn't just rebuild a house. I laid each brick with proof that they were wrong about me. They say homes are built with blueprints and beams, but mine was built with anger, with aching wrists and blistered palms, with the refusal to be buried in the ruin they left me. The first night after walking out of the Grove, I moved into the attic above a laundromat on Bay Street. It smelled of dryer sheets and mildew. The ceiling bowed like a sigh. My mattress was a fold-out futon on splintered wood, and my only view was a blinking neon open sign that never quite turned off. It was also the first time I ever felt free. Harper Ellis moved in 3 weeks later with a duffel bag, a toolbox, and a warning. I snore, I swear, and I don't believe in rich people's fairy tales. We made it work. I took on freelance design jobs, repainting thrift store shelves, reorganizing pantries for moms with 3 kids and no time, salvaging half-broken coffee tables into something you might call rustic. Clients didn't always pay in money. Sometimes it was dinner, sometimes it was leftover tile. Once, it was a set of vintage doorknobs I still keep in a box labeled Someday. Someday came slowly. The blog started on a whim. From dust to design. I posted grainy before and after photos, wrote essays about light and silence, about why broken things still matter. I shared sketches on napkins, updates on projects, the lessons I learned after ripping out my first sink the wrong way and flooding the attic kitchen. Traffic was pitiful at first. 7 views, most of them probably Harper. But then Liam and Tyler, the couple who owned the tiny cafe 2 blocks down, asked if I could help them redesign their back patio. I said yes. In return, they offered free coffee and let me repaint their entire front facade. I documented every moment. When their business tripled in foot traffic 2 months later, they told everyone who would listen. The blog caught on. Slowly. A repost here, a magazine feature there. People loved the grit, the mess, the refusal to give up. By 2018, I had saved just enough for a down payment on a crumbling colonial on Farley Hill. It was the ugliest house I'd ever seen. Peeling yellow paint, sagging porch, raccoons in the crawl space. It was also perfect. This place is haunted, Harper said the first time she stepped inside. Good, I replied. Then we won't be the only ghosts. We worked every weekend. Knocked down walls, painted ceilings, discovered rotten beams, and buried liquor bottles. I cried the day we installed real windows, not because they were beautiful, but because for the first time, I saw myself inside something I built. Some nights I'd lie on the floor of the unfinished living room, staring at the beams above, repeating lines from my own blog like a prayer. Design isn't decoration. It's proof that you imagined something better and made it real. One night, Harper came in covered in drywall dust and said, "You know, I think your mom was wrong. I looked up. About what? That legacy thing. She smirked. You're building one every damn day. I smiled but didn't reply, because I'd heard another voice that day, one I hadn't heard in years. Grayson. It was a voicemail. Short, awkward, something about how he needed help after a bad investment. And could I lend him $12,000 until things stabilized? I wired the money. That was 5 years ago. He never mentioned it again. I never asked. Some debts are heavier than money. And still the house rose. Inch by inch, room by room. The kitchen came last. White tiles, deep blue cabinets, antique drawer pulls I polished by hand. One night, I lay in the center of the finished living room, surrounded by warm light, clean floors, and the scent of lemon oil. It was silent. Still. Sacred. A quiet victory. Harper came in with a thick ivory envelope in hand. Her boots tracked in a bit of soil, but I didn't care. Mail, she said, dropping it beside me. Did you know they're planning a wedding here? I sat up slowly. What? She tapped the front of the envelope where gold lettering spelled Chloe and Grayson. Save the date. My spine stiffened. My fingers closed around it like it might bite. They're getting married? I asked. Harper raised an eyebrow. Not just that. The ceremony? Says Whitaker Estate? That's this address. I stared at the words, at the house I bled into, at the name they still tried to own. I didn't answer. But I knew one thing. They were about to find out who this house really belonged to. They didn't include my name on the invitation, but they printed my address in gold foil. The envelope was thick, expensive, and reeked of entitlement. Harper found it wedged between an architecture digest and a coupon booklet on our porch, its cursive lettering gleaming with the kind of artificial charm only money could buy. I opened it slowly, already guessing what I'd find inside. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Chloe Hartman and Grayson Whitaker. The date was bold, the dress code formal, the venue, the Whitaker Garden Estate, followed by my address, zip code, and even a cute custom hashtag, #, Whitaker Hearts Hartman. No mention of me. No request for permission. No RSVP. Just the assumption that they still owned everything I had built. I sat down hard on the edge of the stairs, my fingers gripping the invitation until the paper crinkled. Harper hovered nearby, watching me like she wasn't sure if I'd cry, scream, or start ripping out floorboards. They think they can just take it? I asked quietly. They don't think, Harper muttered. They assume. She was right. Chloe had always moved through the world like everything was an accessory. Homes, people, her fiancé's estranged sister. I opened Instagram out of habit, not expecting anything but distraction. Instead, I found a story already trending. Chloe, standing in front of my front door, our front door, framed by the arched blue wood and blooming jasmine vines Harper and I had planted last year. Venue sneak peek? She chirped into the camera. Can't believe how timeless this place is. Just perfect for a Southern Garden wedding, right? The caption read, Family roots run deep, Erie Whitaker Estate. I stared at the screen. My chest tightened. Roots? That tree out front had been planted by Harper and me. The stone walkway we hand-poured. The reclaimed shutters Chloe called vintage accents. I'd sanded every splinter myself. And now she was showcasing my home like it was some ancestral heirloom handed down with love and intention. I refreshed the design firm's inbox. There were 5 new emails from vendors I didn't recognize. Hi, confirming the lighting layout for the April 6th ceremony. Can you please send updated measurements of the pergola? Just a quick check. Will the bride's suite be ready for the hair and makeup team by 7 a.m.? I didn't respond. I couldn't. My hands shook too hard to type. Then the reviews began. My business listing pinged with 1-star ratings. Unprofessional. Didn't follow through. Promised event coordination. Never responded. Wouldn't recommend for weddings or formal events. Harper dug deeper, clicking through usernames. One belonged to an intern at Hartman PR, the boutique agency Chloe used for her influencer brand. "She's trying to tank your reputation before you even say no," Harper said, fury coloring her voice. Or maybe she never expected me to say anything at all. I scrolled through Chloe's latest grid post, a filtered photo of garden twinkle lights and champagne flutes. Caption: "Manifesting magic where legacy lives. My house, my legacy, my silence." I wasn't going to be silent anymore. "I'm calling Rhea," I said. Rhea Dawson had been a friend of a friend, a contract attorney with a wicked sense of humor and a brutal talent for reading fine print. I sent her every vendor message, every photo, every screenshot. She called back 20 minutes later. "Well," she said dryly, "they've either made a very stupid mistake or a very calculated one." "What do you mean?" "The vendor contracts are signed by someone using your business name but registered to an address one digit off. A trick to bypass verification if someone's in a rush." My stomach dropped. "Can I fight this?" Rhea's voice sharpened. "You have to." Meanwhile, Harper was tracking the reviews, connecting each account to Chloe's PR agency, tagging IP addresses, compiling proof. "She built a whole campaign using your house as a backdrop," Harper said. "This isn't just a venue grab, it's theft of your work, your brand, your damn name." And it was working. Clients had stopped replying. One even canceled a consultation. That night, as I reread the invitation again, memorizing the curls of gold ink, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Hi, we're arriving Friday morning for setup. I was told you'll be away." My blood turned to ice. They weren't just planning around me. They were planning to erase me completely. They'd built a wedding on a lie. I built a perimeter. The first thing I did was change the locks, then the Wi-Fi password. Then I installed a wireless security system that streamed every motion-triggered frame directly to a cloud I owned in 5 redundantly encrypted forms. Harper called it overkill. I called it preparation. By Monday morning, the yard was a battlefield of hidden cameras, boundary markers, and red-flagged permits nailed to the inside of every door. "Private property. Trespassing will be prosecuted." Looked almost quaint in laminated form, but the cease and desist letters Rhea drafted were anything but. We sent the first wave to all vendors listed on the fake contracts. Caterers, florists, photographers, even the violinist. "You may have been misled into believing this property is available," the letter began. "It is not. Any further attempt to enter or advertise this location constitutes legal trespass, fraud, and misuse of branding." By noon, 3 vendors had replied apologetically. One even attached a contract, signed digitally by someone using my name but with a Gmail address I didn't recognize. The signature looked off. So did the timestamp. "I didn't authorize this," I told Rhea, sliding my laptop across her desk. She clicked, zoomed, and nodded once. "Good. Then we just got our first solid piece of impersonation." The next few days blurred into phone calls, screenshots, notarizations. Harper built a spreadsheet of social posts cross-referenced with vendor interactions, adding footnotes with timestamps and geotags. I cataloged every fake review, filed a defamation complaint with Yelp, and drafted a formal rebuttal with Rhea for the press, just in case it came to that. But the worst part wasn't digital. It came in the form of perfume and pearls. Teresa Hartman. She requested a meeting for clarity and grace at a cafe near River Street. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to look her in the eye when I said no. She arrived on time, lips taut with Southern composure. Everything about her was curated. The pastel cardigan, the diamond crucifix, the careful condescension hidden in her smile. "Elawan," she began, sitting down across from me. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." I said nothing. She clasped her hands. "The venue was chosen months ago. Chloe assumed it was family-held. She didn't realize the situation with your inheritance was, well, intentionally erased," I offered. Teresa's smile thinned. Grayson always spoke fondly of you and your work. This was meant to be an olive branch. I leaned back. You mean we disowned you, used your name, your house, and your labor, and now we want photos in your garden? That kind of branch? She blinked once, twice, then leaned forward. The media loves a redemption arc. Families coming together, you standing beside your brother, would be healing for everyone, especially Chloe's brand. That's when I understood. This wasn't a reconciliation. It was an aesthetic. I set down my teacup carefully. You don't get to weaponize my silence anymore. Teresa's eyes narrowed. We're simply trying to avoid unnecessary conflict. You already started the war. I stood. On the walk back to the car, my phone buzzed. A city clerk had finally returned Ria's inquiry. She called me immediately. They submitted a permit, she said, for amplified music, parking, and temporary structures, all filed under an address ending in 118. Yours ends in 181. That's not a typo. That's fraud. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, heart pounding. Can we use that? Absolutely. If they proceed, they're in direct violation. You'll have grounds for a full injunction. I could breathe again. Not all the way, but enough. That night, Harper and I reviewed camera feeds, reorganized files, updated passwords. I lit a candle in the kitchen. The good kind. The kind that made the room smell like lemon and vetiver and vengeance. Then my phone buzzed again. Instagram. At Chloe Hart's, Hartman had just posted a teaser. A slow pan over my garden. My trees. My archway. Caption, everything is falling into place. I didn't crash the wedding. I just locked the gates and watched. The morning of April 6th arrived as calm as a held breath. Fog rolled low across the garden, softening the hedges I'd trimmed just last week. Birds chirped like nothing was wrong, but I knew better. At 6 a.m., I turned off the exterior motion sensors, just enough to let the first vendor trucks approach, but not enough to let them in. By 6:12, the gate cameras recorded the first confused horn honk. At 6:27, a pastel delivery van tried the intercom. By 7 o'clock, Harper texted me 2 words. It begins. I wasn't home to greet them. I'd booked a waterfront villa at Clearwater Cove with a perfect line of sight back toward Farley Hill, binoculars on the balcony, laptop open to the cloud stream, coffee hot and bitter beside me. I settled in. The wedding guests began arriving around 9:30. They were dressed like a garden exploded. Lilac suits, champagne gowns, chiffon in every possible hue of overkill. They came in town cars and rented Teslas, stepping out in heels not built for gravel and humidity. One by one, they approached the gate and stopped. Right in front of them, printed on clean white cardstock and laminated just enough to make it look permanent, was the posted notice. Private property. No entry. This location is not approved for event use. Violators subject to civil trespass and legal action. Please contact venue coordinator for clarification. Chloe didn't appear until 10:17, draped in ivory and lace, trailed by 2 hairstylists, 1 mother, and what I could only assume was a personal documentarian holding a DSLR like a weapon. The camera caught her face morphing from confusion to disbelief to rage in under 10 seconds. Teresa rushed forward, dialing furiously on her phone. I let it ring. And ring. And ring. At 10:32, the caterers attempted to unload anyway. Trays of chilled oysters and garden tartlets waiting for direction. A police cruiser pulled up quietly behind them. 2 officers stepped out, calm, clipboard in hand. They examined the printed notice, asked for permits. One flipped through a folder of contracts. Another spoke into his radio. No one raised their voice, and then, clear as day on the audio feed, one officer said, "This venue is not authorized. All parties not listed on the deed are to vacate. Now." The caterers packed up. The florist began dismantling centerpieces that had never been placed. Someone took a selfie, awkwardly, nervously, next to the closed iron gate. Teresa pleaded with the officer. Chloe screamed something about brand sabotage. Margot stood statue still, fingers clenched around her clutch like it could rewrite the last 20 minutes. Grayson said nothing. He walked slowly toward the camera I'd mounted above the front gate. He looked straight into the lens. Into me. For a moment, he didn't look angry. Just hollow. And then he turned and walked away. The guests began leaving in quiet waves. At 11:05, Harold slammed the gate shut so hard the hinge jostled, shaking the entire camera. His face was red, unreadable. A man with no script left to recite. Back at the villa, I stirred my coffee. Harper sat beside me, watching the feed in silence. Neither of us cheered. At 11:34, the last SUV rolled down the street. Chloe had vanished somewhere inside. Teresa followed after her. And Margot stayed behind. She approached the gate alone, gloved fingers fishing something from her handbag. A cream-colored envelope. She pressed it to the metal, wedging it into the hinge, right where the camera could see. Then she stepped back, adjusted her shawl, and walked away without looking back. I didn't need to open it to know what it would say, but I did anyway. The handwriting was deliberate, familiar, almost brittle. "You've gone too far, Elowen." They crossed me off the family tree, so I planted my own. The first time I planted a tree behind the shed, I was 17. A sapling from the nursery, small and scrappy, roots wrapped in burlap and hope. My father had it dug up within a week, claimed it would mess with the plumbing. I planted it again this morning. Same spot, same kind. But this time, no one touched it. By dusk, the backyard glowed under a canopy of string lights Harper had looped between the trees. The air smelled like lemon thyme and roasted vegetables. A long table stretched across the garden path, set with mismatched plates, folded linen napkins, and hand-poured candles. It wasn't a statement. It was a celebration. 15 seats, every one of them filled by someone who chose me. Liam and Tyler brought fresh bread and a homemade berry galette. Rhea arrived late, cradling 2 bottles of wine and a bouquet of rosemary sprigs tied with twine. Harper wore her victory boots, scuffed, steel-toed, and exactly right for stomping out nonsense. No one asked about the wedding. No one needed to. Instead, we passed dishes, clinked glasses, and shared the kind of laughter that doesn't ask for permission. My garden, once a battlefield, had become a haven. The string lights cast warm halos on our faces, and somewhere beneath the table, a stray cat wound between our ankles like it belonged too. When dessert plates were cleared, I stood for a moment, silent, then speaking. "I don't have a toast," I said. "Just a thank you for showing up, not just tonight, but always." Harper grinned. "I'll drink to that." Later, after the last guest left and Harper fell asleep on the porch swing with a blanket over her knees, I returned to the house. There, on the hallway table, sat 3 envelopes. Neat, expensive stationery. My name handwritten on each. One from Margot, one from Chloe, one from Grayson. Each one asking to reconnect, to explain, to heal as a family. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. I carried them to the fireplace, stacked them like firewood, and lit the match. The paper curled, darkened, turned to smoke, and then to ash. I watched it rise. Then I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. A single unread message blinked at the top of my inbox. Daniel Whitaker, a name I barely remembered. A second cousin who once sold artisanal honey at family reunions and pretended to understand art. His message was polite, polished. "Elowen, what happened was unfortunate. But I believe there's still value in our name. If you're open to discussing a collaboration, branding perhaps, we could reclaim some public goodwill. You've built something remarkable. Let's honor the legacy properly." I stared at the screen. Then I hovered over the reply button. The cursor blinked. Instead, I hit delete. That was the answer. I walked back outside. The fire had died down, glowing embers painting the night in soft red. I sat beneath the old oak tree and opened my blog. A new post. Final draft. Justice doesn't always look like a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like a table you build for yourself and choose who sits at it. I hit publish. Then I exhaled. Not triumph, just truth. And for the first time in years, I let the silence feel like peace. They thought silence was the price of my survival. That if they erased my name from invitations, from contracts, from family memories, I would simply fade. Quietly. Conveniently. But the moment I chose not to knock on their door, not to ask for a seat at their table, was the moment I realized I could build my own. No screaming, no spectacle. Just boundaries made of stone, not guilt. I didn't need to fight fire with fire. I planted roots where they'd once left ashes, and I watched as their carefully curated image of family legacy collapsed under the weight of its own entitlement. I didn't burn bridges. I locked gates. And in that stillness, surrounded by the people who chose me, I found the one thing they never offered. Peace. Because the truth was never loud. It was patient. And it waited. What Elowen reclaimed was never revenge. It was sovereignty. Over her voice, her home, her story. In choosing not to respond with cruelty, she revealed the quiet endurance of someone who had endured enough. The ones who weaponized love for control were exposed, not by confrontation, but by consequence. Justice did not wear a robe or hold a gavel. It arrived through paperwork, boundaries, and undeniable facts. Like roots breaking through concrete, truth has a way of surfacing. And when it does, no performance or pretense can bury it for long. Because when injustice is met with calm defiance, the final verdict always echoes. Thank you for staying with Elowen's story until the very end. This wasn't a tale of revenge. It was a reckoning. Of silence reclaimed. Of names unspoken finally given weight. Of what happens when a woman stops asking to be seen and starts designing a life where she never has to be erased again. Elowen didn't win because she fought louder. She won because she outlasted the noise. Because while they planned a wedding on stolen ground, she planted a tree in the very soil they abandoned. And it grew. Maybe you've been where she's been. Maybe you've watched your name vanish from lists, from memories, from homes you helped build. Maybe you've walked away from a table that never saved you a seat, only to build your own, one place setting at a time. If any part of this story felt like your story, drop your city in the comments. Tell us about a time you chose peace over performance. Or maybe you're still in the middle of it, still drawing your blueprints, still pouring your own foundation. Wherever you are, we're listening. You are not alone. This channel was created for voices like Elowen's. And yours. For the ones who didn't get the final word, but found the last word anyway. For the quiet builders, the soft survivors, the people who turn grief into proof and proof into freedom. So if this story spoke to you, like, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to know their silence holds power too, because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers through walls you built yourself. Sometimes it looks like a gate that doesn't open. Sometimes it feels like peace. And if you're not ready to speak yet, that's okay too. We'll hold the space until you are. Thank you for watching. Thank you for seeing her. We'll see you in the next story.